You think the cold comes from snow, but the real freeze comes from the scorn of your own blood. Shivering in a cheap motel parking lot off Route 9, I watched my resume tumble into gray slush, taking my last shred of dignity with it. I almost let it rot. Then an old stranger snatched it up, read my middle name, and unlocked a $450 million secret that would finally burn my family's empire to the ground. My name is Alara Vance, and for the last 22 days, my address has been the back seat of a rusted '98 Honda Civic parked illegally behind the Last Stop Motel. Technically, I am what the sociologists call the hidden homeless. I am not the person you step over on the subway grate, wrapped in blankets that smell of urine and despair. I am the woman you see brushing her teeth in the McDonald's bathroom at 6 in the morning. I am the person using the free Wi-Fi at the public library to send out dozens of job applications, wearing a blazer I ironed with a hair straightener plugged into the car's cigarette lighter. I am the ghost in the machine of this city, invisible until the moment I become an inconvenience. The cold in New Jersey does not just sit on your skin, it hunts you. It finds the gaps in the weather's stripping of the car door and gnaws at your bones. I had layered 3 sweaters under my coat, but the shivering was a constant, low-frequency vibration that made my teeth ache. I rubbed my hands together, trying to generate enough friction to feel my fingertips. My stomach growled, a hollow, cramping reminder that my last meal had been half a bagel I scavenged from a conference room trash can 2 days ago, before security escorted me out. That was the day I hit the bottom. I had been working as an executive assistant at a mid-level logistics firm, a job I was overqualified for but desperate to keep. I was the first one in and the last one out. I fixed the spreadsheets the vice president broke. I organized the chaotic schedules of men who made more in a month than I would see in 3 years. And then, when the VP missed a critical deadline because he was golfing in the Hamptons, he pointed a manicured finger at me. Incompetence. He had told HR. She filed the brief late. It was a lie. The digital logs proved it was a lie, but he was the nephew of the CEO, and I was Alara Vance, the nobody with a persistent shadow over her background. I was fired without severance, escorted out like a criminal, and left standing on the sidewalk with a cardboard box containing a stapler and a dying succulent. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror now. Dark circles bruised the skin under my eyes. My hair, usually kept in a sharp, professional bun, was fraying at the edges. I looked exactly like what I was, a discard pile. It was hard not to think about heritage on nights like this. My mother used to tell me that blood mattered less than character, but she died coughing blood into a handkerchief in a studio apartment with no heat, while the people who shared our DNA slept on silk sheets in penthouses overlooking Central Park. I was the dirty little secret of the Harrington dynasty. My mother had been the housekeeper's daughter, beautiful and naive, and my father had been the golden son of the Harrington Empire. When I was born, the checks came with a conditioned silence. We were erased. I was forbidden from stepping foot near their buildings, forbidden from using the name, forbidden from existing in their world. They thought they had buried us, and looking at my situation now, freezing in a parking lot off Route 9, it seemed they had succeeded. The sudden flash of blue and red lights against the fogged-up windows made my heart hammer against my ribs. It was the police. A loud, authoritative rap on the glass shattered my thoughts. Let's move it along. You can't park here overnight. Private property. Panic is a cold thing. Colder than the wind. I scrambled into the front seat, my limbs stiff and clumsy. I knew the drill. If I didn't move fast enough, they would impound the car. If they took the car, I lost my shelter, my closet, and my only means of escape. I lost everything. I'm moving. Officer, I'm moving, I shouted through the glass, my voice cracking. I fumbled with the ignition, but my hands were shaking too badly. I needed to consolidate my things. I grabbed the plastic bin from the passenger seat, my mobile office, and tried to shove it into the back to make room for myself. That was when the latch on the bin snapped. It happened in slow motion. The lid popped open, and a gust of icy wind, opportunistic and cruel, whipped through the open door I had just cracked to clear the condensation. My papers took flight. No, no, no. I threw the door open and scrambled out into the slush. The parking lot was covered in a gray, miserable paste of melting snow and motor oil. My documents were scattering like dead leaves. These weren't just papers. They were my lifeline, my birth certificate, my social security card, and the 20 copies of my resume I had printed with the last $5 to my name. I fell to my knees, the freezing wet soaking instantly through my jeans. I snatched at the papers, desperate and pathetic. A cruiser's siren blared a short, warning chirp behind me, urging me to hurry up and disappear. One sheet of paper, a resume on high-quality linen stock that I had saved for a special interview, tumbled across the asphalt. It landed near the boots of a man standing by the curb, waiting for a taxi under the flickering neon sign of the motel. I crawled toward it, reaching out a trembling hand. The paper was already soaking up the grime, the ink threatening to bleed. I felt a hot flush of shame burn my neck. I didn't want anyone to see me like this. I wanted to snatch it, ball it up, and drive into the dark. But a hand, wrinkled and spotted with age but steady, reached down and picked it up before I could. I looked up. The man was old, perhaps in his late 70s. He wore a wool trench coat that was high quality but visibly worn at the cuffs, and a fedora that seemed out of place in this decade. His face was lined with the kind of deep grooves that come from a lifetime of reading fine print, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently fixed on my muddy resume. "Give that back," I rasped. Getting to my feet, I wiped my dirty hands on my coat, trying to salvage some scrap of dignity. "Please. It's trash now." He didn't hand it back. He didn't even look at me. He was staring at the header of the document. "Vance," he muttered, reading the bold print, then his eyes narrowed, focusing on the smaller text underneath, the full legal name I was required to use for background checks. Elara Celestia Vance. He looked up then, and the intensity of his gaze made me take a step back. He didn't look at me with pity, which was what I was used to. He looked at me with recognition, a terrifying, surgical kind of recognition. "I said give it back," I said, my voice engaging a defensive edge. "I have to go. The police are waiting." He stepped closer, ignoring the flashing lights of the cruiser behind us. He held the damp resume like it was a sacred text. "Celestia," he said, the word rolling off his tongue with a weight I didn't understand. "That is not a common middle name. Miss Vance, not in this part of the world." "It was my grandmother's," I snapped, reaching for the paper. "Look, mister, I don't have money for whatever you're selling. I don't have anything." He caught my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong, not aggressive, but anchoring. "I am not selling anything," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper that cut through the wind. "I am asking you a question. Do you know what this name signifies in the 1995 Testament?" I stared at him, my breath hitching in the cold air. "What, you're crazy." "The 1995 Testament," he repeated, his eyes searching mine, looking for a ghost. "The one they said was lost, the one that was never probated because the witnesses vanished." I yanked my arm back. "I don't know what you're talking about. Let me go." He was senile. He had to be. Just another casualty of the city, mind broken by age and cold, babbling about wills and testaments to a homeless woman in a parking lot. I turned to the car, my heart pounding. I needed to leave. "I was the notary," he said. I froze. My hand was on the door handle of my Civic. The wind howled around us, rattling the broken sign of the Last Stop Motel. I turned back slowly. "What did you say?" The old man straightened his coat. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a leather card holder. He extracted a simple, cream-colored business card and extended it to me. His hand was trembling slightly now, not from cold, but from something that looked like adrenaline. "My name is Arthur Sterling," he said. "For 40 years, I served as the primary notary public for the high estates of New York. I notarized the signatures of men who built this country and men who tried to sell it." I looked at the card. It was simple. Arthur Sterling, notary public retired. There was no address, just a phone number written in fountain pen on the back. "I was there," Arthur continued, his voice low. "I was in the room when your grandfather, Elias Harrington, drafted the codicil to his will. The family claims it never existed. They claim he died senile, leaving everything to Victoria." The name Victoria hung in the air between us like a curse. My stepmother, the woman who had ensured my mother died without a penny for pain medication, the woman who ran the Harrington Media Group with an iron fist. "You knew Elias," I whispered. "I knew him well enough to know he hated what his daughter had become," Arthur said. "And I knew him well enough to witness the document he created to stop her. A document that required a specific beneficiary to step forward, a beneficiary with the middle name Celestia." He looked at my resume again, then folded it carefully and placed it in his own pocket, as if protecting it from the elements. "They told me the line had ended," Arthur said, almost to himself. "They told me the child had died or been sent away. But here you are." The police cruiser chirped again, louder this time. A loudspeaker crackled. "Last warning. Clear the lot." Arthur stepped in close, his urgency palpable. "Listen to me carefully. Elara Vance, do not go to the bank. Do not apply for unemployment. Do not let your name appear on any government database today." "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because if Victoria Harrington finds out you are in the city, you won't just be homeless. You will be erased." He pressed a scrap of paper into my hand along with the card. It had an address on Wall Street scribbled on it. "Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock sharp. Come to this address. It is my old office. It is abandoned, but I still have the keys. Use the service entrance in the alley. Do not let anyone see you." "Why should I trust you?" I asked. "You're a stranger in a parking lot." Arthur looked at me, and for the first time, a small, sad smile touched his lips. "Because you have your grandfather's eyes," he said, "and because you just lost your resume in the mud, which tells me you have absolutely nothing left to lose." The taxi he had been waiting for pulled up to the curb, splashing slush onto the sidewalk. Arthur opened the door. "8 o'clock. Miss Vance," he said. "Don't be late. Destiny has a tight schedule." He got in, and the taxi sped away, disappearing into the dark artery of Route 9. I stood there for a second, the snow melting in my hair, the business card burning a hole in my frozen palm. The police siren wailed, snapping me back to reality. I dove into my car, slammed the door, and turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life. I peeled out of the parking lot, merging onto the highway with the rest of the anonymous traffic. My heart was racing, a drumbeat of fear and confusion. Was it a prank? A delusion? Or was it the lifeline I had been praying for? My stomach cramped again, a reminder of my hunger. But for the first time in weeks, the gnawing feeling wasn't just emptiness, it was anticipation. I glanced at the rearview mirror. The scared, exhausted girl was still there, but something had shifted behind the iris. The dull resignation was gone, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. Ahead of me, a massive electronic billboard lit up the night sky. It was an advertisement for the new Harrington luxury line. A sleek silver car glided across the screen, followed by the face of the company Victoria Harrington. She was smiling, a cold, perfect, predatory smile that I had seen in magazines my entire life. "The future belongs to those who take it." The slogan read. I gripped the steering wheel of my rusted Honda until my knuckles turned white. "We'll see about that, Victoria," I whispered to the empty car. "We'll see." The building was a relic, a narrow slice of brick and mortar squeezed between two glass titans on Wall Street that scraped the sky. It looked like a rotten tooth in a perfect $1,000,000 smile. I stood at the service entrance in the alleyway, shivering not just from the lingering morning frost, but from the terrifying absurdity of what I was doing. I had parked my car 3 blocks away in a loading zone, praying it would not be towed, and walked here with my head down, hiding my face inside my scarf as Arthur had instructed. At exactly 8 o'clock, the heavy steel door groaned open. Arthur Sterling stood there, He looked different than he had in the parking lot. The desperation was gone, replaced by a rigid, professional tension. He ushered me inside and threw 3 deadbolts behind us. The interior smelled of old paper, pipe tobacco, and silence. It was a sensory assault compared to the sterile pine sol scent of the corporate offices I had been kicked out of. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light cutting through the heavy velvet drapes. The office was a labyrinth of mahogany bookshelves stacked floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes, their spines cracking with age. It felt less like a law office and more like a tomb where secrets went to wait. Arthur did not offer me coffee. He did not ask how I slept. He pointed to a high-backed leather chair in front of a desk that looked large enough to land a plane on. "The resume," he demanded, extending a hand. I reached into my coat pocket. The document was stiff and wrinkled, stained with a brown watermark from the slush of the parking lot. I handed it to him, feeling a flush of humiliation. That piece of paper was supposed to represent my professional worth, and now it looked like trash. Arthur laid it flat on the desk, smoothing out the creases with a reverence that made my skin crawl. He put on a pair of thick spectacles and pulled a yellow legal pad toward him. "You listed your mother's maiden name here," he said, tapping the paper. "Sarah Vance. But you did not list her employers." "She cleaned houses," I said, my voice sounding small in the cavernous room. "She worked off the books. Why does this matter?" "It matters because Elias kept track," Arthur murmured. He opened a drawer and pulled out a ledger. He watched from a distance. He knew where Sarah worked, and he knew where you worked. He looked up at me, his eyes magnified by the lenses. "You were fired from Apex Logistics 3 weeks ago. Before that, you were let go from Citadel Heavy Industries, and your first job out of college was at Nova Communications, correct?" "Yes," I said, frowning. "I have terrible luck, or I'm just incompetent. That is what they told me." Arthur let out a dry, mirthless laugh. "Incompetence had nothing to do with it. Elara, Apex, Citadel, Nova. Do you know who owns the controlling interest in all 3 of those firms?" I shook my head. "Harrington Global," he said. "They are shell companies. Subsidiaries buried under 3 layers of corporate bureaucracy. You didn't just stumble into bad luck. You were working for your family without knowing it. And every time you started to rise, every time you showed promise, someone flagged your file and cut you loose." I felt the air leave my lungs. They knew Victoria knew where I was. "Victoria Harrington knows everything that happens on her payroll," Arthur said. "She didn't want you to starve to death. Elara, that would look bad. She wanted you broken. She wanted you kept low, desperate, and pliable. She has been managing your poverty like it is a portfolio." The rage that flared in my chest was hot and blinding, but Arthur did not give me time to process it. He stood up and walked to the bookshelf behind him. He pulled on a copy of the Civil Code, and with a heavy mechanical clank, the entire section of the shelf swung forward. Behind it sat a black iron safe, older than the building itself. Arthur spun the dial. Left, right, left. The tumblers clicked like gunshots in the quiet room. He swung the heavy door open and retrieved a single, thick envelope. It was not white. It was a deep, aged manila, sealed with red wax that had cracked over time. He placed it on the desk between us. Written on the front in a shaky but defiant hand were 2 words, Project Celestia. "Your grandfather, Elias Harrington, was a ruthless man," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He built an empire on steel and media, but in his final years, he saw Victoria for what she was, a shark who would eat her own young. He knew she was poisoning him. He knew she was forging his signature on board resolutions. So why didn't he stop her?" I asked. "He tried, but the drugs she had him on made him weak. The courts would have deemed him mentally incompetent if he tried to change the main will publicly. So, he created this." Arthur tapped the envelope. "A shadow trust. A failsafe." He broke the wax seal. The sound was like a bone snapping. He slid out a stack of documents and a digital drive that looked like a floppy disk from the 90s. along with a modern USB drive that Arthur must have updated himself. Elias moved liquid assets into a blind trust in 1995, Arthur explained. At the time, it was valued at $60 million. He invested it in high-risk, high-yield tech stocks that everyone else thought were foolish. Apple in the 90s, Amazon when it was just books. Arthur looked me dead in the eye. The Harrington Maine estate, the one Victoria controls, is debt-ridden. It is a house of cards kept up by loans and image, but this trust has been sitting untouched, compounding interest for 30 years. He pushed a piece of paper toward me. It was a bank statement dated yesterday. Read the bottom line, Elara. I looked. I blinked. I looked again. The numbers swam before my eyes. $452,893,412.16. This is a mistake, I stammered. I pushed the paper away as if it were radioactive. This isn't real. It is very real, Arthur said. But there is a catch. Elias knew Victoria would challenge any standard will, so he added a condition, a proof of cruelty clause. He turned to a page in the legal document, pointing to a paragraph circled in red ink. To unlock the Celestia Trust, the beneficiary must prove two things. First, identity via the middle name Celestia. Second, the beneficiary must be in a state of financial ruin caused by the Harrington family's neglect or direct action. Arthur picked up my muddy resume again. This is not just a CV. Elara, this is the proof. It documents a timeline of systematic termination by Harrington's subsidiaries. It documents your address or lack thereof. It proves that despite being the granddaughter of a billionaire, you are destitute. You have fulfilled the condition. You have suffered enough to earn your inheritance. I sat back in the leather chair, feeling dizzy, the poverty, the hunger, the nights freezing in the car. It wasn't just tragedy, it was the key. My suffering was the combination to the safe. So I'm rich, I whispered. Just like that, I can buy a house, I can buy a coat that isn't from Goodwill. You are the majority shareholder of the true Harrington wealth, Arthur corrected. Victoria has the title and the debt. You have the capital. If you sign this, you can buy the company out from under her. You can evict her from the penthouse. You can burn her legacy to ash. He slid a heavy fountain pen across the mahogany. But you must understand what happens next, Arthur said, his expression hardening. This trust is linked to the central banking mainframe of the Harrington Group. It was designed that way to trigger a hostile takeover automatically. The second you sign this, and I input the authorization code, a silent alarm will trip in Victoria's office. The room seemed to get colder. She will know, I asked. She won't just know. She will see the money moving. She will see the name Vance, and she will realize that the ghost she thought was buried is coming for her throat. Victoria has a private security team that operates outside the law. They call themselves the cleanup crew. They are the ones who ran me off the road 5 years ago and forced me into hiding. Arthur leaned forward, his face inches from mine. If you sign this, Elara, there is no going back to the car. There is no going back to anonymity. You are declaring war on one of the most powerful women in New York. She will hunt you. She will try to kill you before the transfer clears the International Clearinghouse, which takes 48 hours. I looked at the pen. I looked at the resume, stained with the grime of the parking lot where I had slept. I thought about the security guard who looked at me like I was vermin when he kicked me out of the lobby yesterday. I thought about my mother, coughing in the dark, too afraid to ask for help because she had been terrified of Victoria. They had taken everything from us. They had made me think I was worthless. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy, cold, and solid. I don't want to go back to the car, I said, my voice steady for the first time that morning. And I don't want to just survive. Arthur, I want to win. Then sign, Arthur said. Sign your name, your full name. I pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. Elara Celestia Vance. Arthur took the paper back. He didn't smile, but his eyes glittered with a fierce, vindictive light. He turned to an ancient computer terminal on a side desk, a machine that looked like it belonged in a museum. He typed in a command string that I couldn't follow. The screen flickered green. He inserted the USB drive. Processing. The cursor blinked. Once, twice, then, text scrolled across the monitor in blocky, pixelated letters. Identity verified Celestia Air. Condition destitution confirmed. Access granted. Current balance, $450 million. It is done, Arthur said, hitting the enter key one last time. The file is open. Somewhere in a glass tower uptown. A phone was about to ring. Somewhere. Victoria Harrington was about to spill her morning mimosa. What do we do now? I asked, looking at the number on the screen. A number that could buy nations. Arthur stood up and buttoned his coat. He looked like a general preparing for his final battle. Now, he said. We run. The silence in Arthur's office was shattered not by a noise, but by a notification on my cracked smartphone screen. It was a simple, digital chime that I had associated with spam emails or overdue bill warnings for the last 5 years. But this time, the text message was from a private server Arthur had set up only minutes ago. Wire transfer received $50,000. I stared at the number. It was an advance, a drop in the bucket compared to the $450 million sitting in the trust. But to me, it was more money than I had ever seen in one place. It was freedom. It was breakfast. It was a weapon. Arthur did not celebrate. He was staring at his computer monitor, his face bathed in the harsh green glow of the scrolling code. The silent alarm has been tripped, Arthur said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. At the Harrington headquarters, on the 42nd floor, a red light just blinked on a secure server. I know this because I designed the system 30 years ago. I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the drafty room. I could almost picture it. I could imagine Victoria Harrington, a woman who treated emotion like a weakness, sitting in her glass-walled office. I imagined her receiving the encrypted message. I imagined the crystal flute of mid-morning champagne slipping from her manicured fingers and shattering against the marble floor. She would not scream. Victoria never screamed. She would whisper, and that whisper would be a death sentence. She is calling the cleanup crew, Arthur said, closing the laptop with a snap. We have to move, now. My car, I said, standing up. It's in the loading zone. Your car is a beacon, Arthur snapped. Leave it. It is already burned. You are a ghost now, Elara. Ghosts do not drive rusted Hondas. We left the office through the back alley. The wind was biting, but the $50,000 in my digital account kept me warm. Arthur hailed a cab, not for himself, but for me. He pressed a burner phone into my hand. Go to the St. Regis, he instructed. Pay cash. Do not use your old name. Use the alias on the ID inside the phone case. I have a contact meeting you there in 2 hours. His name is Liam Thorne. The journalist, I asked, recalling the name from a scandal a few years back. I thought he was disgraced. He was destroyed, Arthur corrected, by Victoria, which makes him the only man in this city I trust to watch your back. Checking into the St. Regis felt like hallucinating. I was wearing jeans stained with mud and a coat that smelled of stale car exhaust. Yet the concierge did not blink when I slapped a stack of crisp $100 bills on the counter. Money was the ultimate perfume. It masked the scent of desperation perfectly. I showered for 40 minutes. I scrubbed my skin until it was raw, trying to wash away the feeling of the parking lot, the feeling of the police officer's flashlight, the feeling of being nothing. When I stepped out, wrapped in a robe that cost more than my first car, I didn't feel like Elara the homeless girl anymore. I felt like someone else, someone dangerous. I used the hotel room service to order clothes from the boutique downstairs, a black wool coat, tailored trousers, leather boots that didn't leak. When I looked in the mirror, the transformation was startling. The dark circles under my eyes were still there, but the clothes acted like armor. A knock came at the door at exactly 2 in the afternoon. I opened it to find a man leaning against the doorframe. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Liam Thorne was younger than I expected, perhaps 32, but his face was etched with the kind of cynicism that usually takes a lifetime to accumulate. He wore a leather jacket that had seen better days and held an unlit cigarette between his fingers. "You must be the heiress," he said, his voice raspy. He looked me up and down, analyzing me with eyes that were too sharp for comfort. "Arthur said you were desperate, but you look like you just bought the place." "I am adjusting," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." Liam walked in and went straight to the minibar. He cracked open a soda water and sat on the edge of the velvet sofa. "Let's get one thing straight," Liam said, pointing the bottle at me. "I am not a babysitter. Arthur told me you found the Celestia file. I didn't believe him. So, before I risk my neck for a girl who was sleeping in a car yesterday, show me." I didn't argue. I pulled the copy of the trust document Arthur had given me from my new bag and tossed it onto the coffee table. Liam picked it up. He read the first page, then the second. His casual slouch evaporated. He sat up straighter, his eyes widening as he scanned the figures, the dates, and the undeniable signature of Elias Harrington. "Holy Mother of God," Liam whispered. "I spent 5 years trying to find a crack in Victoria's armor. I dug through her trash. I bribed her interns, and I got nothing but a lawsuit that ruined my career. And you just walked in off the street with a nuclear bomb in a manila envelope. Can you help me?" I asked. "Arthur says she's coming for me." Liam looked up, and for the first time, I saw a spark in his eyes. It wasn't just interest. It was hunger, the hunger of a wolf that had been starved and just found fresh meat. "Help you?" Liam let out a short, sharp laugh. "Elara, if this is real, I will take a bullet for you, because this isn't just money. This is vindication. This proves she stole the company. This proves she is a fraud." He stood up and walked to the window, peering through the curtains at the street below. "But Arthur is right," he said, his tone dropping. "She knows, and when Victoria knows, she doesn't sue, she erases." "Who are the cleanup crew?" I asked. "Ex-military contractors, private security. Thugs in $3,000 suits." Liam explained without turning around. "They don't have jurisdiction, but they have payroll, and right now, they are tearing apart your life." As if on cue, my old phone, the one I hadn't destroyed yet, buzzed on the table. It was an email notification. "Your account at First City Bank has been frozen due to suspicious activity." Then another. "Alert. Your social security number has been flagged for identity theft." I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking. I opened my news feed. There, buried in the local business section, was a headline that made my stomach turn. "Former Harrington assistant sought for corporate espionage and fraud." "They are fast," I whispered. "They are saying I stole from them." Liam snatched the phone from my hand and dropped it into a glass of water on the bedside table. "Don't look at it," he ordered. "That is the first rule. Do not engage with the narrative they are building. They want you to panic. They want you to run to the police, because they own the police commissioner." "I can't fight this," I said, backing away. "I'm just one person. They have billions." "You have $450 million pending transfer," Liam countered, grabbing my shoulders. "And you have something they don't. You have nothing to lose. They are terrified of you. Elara, that is why they are attacking so hard and so fast. If you were a nobody, they would ignore you. You don't send a tank to kill a mosquito. The fact that they are rolling out the heavy artillery means you are a threat." We left the hotel an hour later. Liam said we had to keep moving. We couldn't stay in one place for more than 6 hours until the trust fund fully unlocked and I could hire my own army. I needed supplies. So we stopped at a high-end pharmacy on Fifth Avenue. Liam waited outside to watch the street. I walked down the aisles, grabbing toiletries, trying to act normal. But my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was standing in the checkout line when I saw them. 2 black SUVs, idling at the curb. They were identical, with tinted windows so dark they looked like voids in reality. A man stepped out of the passenger side of the first vehicle, He was wearing a dark suit and an earpiece. He didn't look like a shopper. He looked like a shark in human skin. He scanned the street, his head moving with robotic precision. Then, his gaze stopped. He was looking directly through the glass front of the pharmacy, directly at me. I dropped the basket. The bottle of shampoo cracked open, spilling goo onto the pristine floor. I didn't wait. I turned and ran toward the back exit. I burst into the alleyway, gasping for air. Liam was already there, grabbing my arm and pulling me behind a dumpster. "They found me," I wheezed. "How did they find me?" "Facial recognition," Liam cursed under his breath. "I forgot they have access to the city grid. We need to get off the main streets." We navigated the back alleys of Manhattan like rats. The cold was biting again, reminding me of the night before. But this time the cold was secondary to the fear. Every siren made me jump. Every shadow looked like a man in a suit. "We need to go dark," Liam said as we huddled in a subway station entrance. "New phones every 4 hours, cash only, no credit cards, no calling old friends." "I don't have old friends," I said bitterly. "Good," Liam said. "Friends are liabilities." We checked into a boutique hotel in Tribeca under the name Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It was a cliché, but cash spoke louder than originality. The room was small but secure. Liam swept the room for bugs using a device he pulled from his jacket, while I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the burner phone Arthur had given me. "You need to learn how to be someone else," Liam said, tossing me a new SIM card. "Elara Vance is a fugitive. You need to be a ghost." He spent the next 3 hours teaching me how to walk without drawing attention, how to spot a tail in a reflection, how to sleep with one eye open. It was a crash course in survival, taught by a man who had been surviving in the shadows for years. Night had fallen over the city. The skyline glittered with indifferent beauty. I was exhausted, my body aching from the tension. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. "Do you think we can win?" I asked softly. Liam was sitting by the window, peering through the blinds. "I think we can make them bleed, and sometimes that is enough." The burner phone in my hand vibrated. I froze. No one had this number except Arthur and Liam. Liam was 3 feet away. Arthur wouldn't call unless it was an emergency. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. Liam turned around, his eyes locking onto the phone. He nodded slowly. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Hello." My voice was shaky. There was a pause, a long but heavy silence that crackled with static. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years drifted through the speaker. It was smooth, cultured, and colder than the grave. "Hello, Elara?" It was Victoria. "I see you found Arthur," she said. She didn't sound angry. She sounded bored, which was infinitely worse. "And I see you have picked up a stray dog. Liam always was a nuisance." "What do you want?" I asked, gripping the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "I want you to be smart," Victoria said. "You are playing a game you do not understand. Darling, you think that piece of paper makes you powerful? It makes you a target. It makes me the owner of your company," I shot back, finding a sudden surge of adrenaline. Victoria laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. "I built this company. Your grandfather was a senile old fool who didn't know when to die. And you are just a mistake that slipped through the cracks." "I'm not afraid of you," I lied. "You should be," she purred. "I know where you are. Maybe not the exact room, but I know the radius. And I know about your mother. It's a shame, really. She died so alone. It would be tragic if her daughter disappeared just as quietly." "Don't you dare talk about her," I hissed. "Return the key, Elara," Victoria said, her voice dropping all pretense of civility. "Renounce the claim. Go back to your car. Go back to the gutter where you belong. If you do, I might let you keep the $50,000. If you don't, well, let's just say the winter is very cold this year, and accidents happen on icy roads every day." "I'm not going back," I said. "And I'm not returning the key. I'm coming for it all. Victoria, I'm coming for the chair you're sitting in." Brave words, Victoria said. "Let's see if you live long enough to say them to my face." The line went dead. I sat there, the silence of the room deafening. Liam looked at me, his expression grim. "She's scared," Liam said. "She didn't sound scared," I whispered. "She threatened you," Liam said. "People like Victoria don't threaten ants. They step on them. The fact that she called you means she can't just step on you anymore. She has to negotiate, or she has to intimidate." I looked at the phone, then at the window where the city lights burned. The fear was still there, churning in my gut. But beneath it, something else had hardened, a layer of ice over the fire. "She thinks I'm going to disappear," I said, standing up and walking to the window to stand beside Liam. "She thinks I'm the same girl who ran away when she fired me." I watched the headlights moving on the street below, imagining the black SUVs prowling, hunting. "I'm not running anymore," I said. "If she wants a war, I'll give her one." The view from the 45th floor of the sleek glass spire in Midtown was deceptive. From up here, the city looked orderly, a grid of lights and moving parts that made sense. It was impossible to see the grime, the slush, or the desperate people sleeping in their cars down below. We had rented the penthouse through a shell corporation Arthur set up, buried under layers of nondescript LLCs that even Victoria's bloodhounds would take weeks to sniff out. It cost $15,000 a week, paid in advance, but it bought us the one thing we desperately needed: a fortress. Arthur sat at the dining table, which was currently buried under stacks of paper. The Project Celestia file was not just a bank account, as it turned out, it was a graveyard. "Elias didn't just hide money," Arthur said, his voice grave as he slid a document toward me. "He hid the bodies, figuratively speaking, of course." I picked up the paper. It was a geological survey report from 1998, stamped with words like confidential and do not duplicate. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "You are looking at why the Harrington Chemical Division is so profitable." Arthur explained. "They aren't processing their waste, they are burying it. Specifically, in a condemned mining zone in West Virginia that borders a water table supplying 3 towns. Elias found out about it 2 months before he died. He was gathering evidence to go to the EPA, but his health declined too rapidly, or rather, was made to decline." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "So Victoria isn't just a thief, she is poisoning people." "And evading taxes," Liam added from the wet bar, where he was pouring himself a sparkling water. He looked better, less like a haunted man and more like a strategist. "Look at the ledgers in the blue folder. She is funneling profits through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and reporting them as losses here to avoid federal taxes. We are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud." "Ilara." I stared at the papers. For the last 2 days, I had been thinking about the money, the $450 million that was now legally mine. I had thought about buying a house, buying peace, maybe disappearing to an island where the name Harrington meant nothing. But looking at these reports, looking at the deliberate cruelty ink-stamped on every page, I realized that taking the money wasn't enough. If I took the cash and ran, Victoria would still be there. She would still be sitting in her tower, poisoning towns, destroying careers, and erasing people like my mother. "I don't want to just take the money," I said quietly. Arthur and Liam stopped what they were doing and looked at me. "I want to hurt her," I said, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. "I want to dismantle her. I want her to feel what it's like to have the floor drop out from under her feet. I want her to lose her name, her reputation, and her freedom." Liam grinned, a sharp, predatory expression. "Now you're talking like a CEO. But to do that," Arthur cautioned, "you cannot be the girl from the parking lot. You cannot be the victim. Victoria feeds on victims. You need to be a peer. You need to be a predator." He was right. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the hallway. I saw Ilara Vance, the assistant. I saw the frizzy hair pulled back in a messy bun. I saw the posture of someone used to apologizing for taking up space. "I need a haircut," I said. The transformation was not about vanity. It was about armor, I didn't go to a salon. We hired a private stylist to come to the penthouse, a woman who asked no questions and accepted a 300% tip for her silence. I sat in the chair and watched the long, tired strands of my hair fall to the floor. "Shorter," I commanded. Sharp, angled. When she was finished, the girl in the mirror was gone. In her place was a woman with a sleek, razor-sharp bob that framed her face like a helmet. I traded my jeans and oversized sweaters for structured blazers, silk blouses, and stilettos that clicked on the floor like the hammer of a gun. I learned to walk differently, not rushing, not scurrying. I learned to take my time, to make the room wait for me. Liam watched me practice my walk in the living room. "You look terrifying," he said approvingly. "Good," I replied. "Now, we need an army." Arthur had the contacts. We couldn't use just any law firm. We needed a firm that hated Harrington Global as much as we did. That list was short, but at the top was Vanguard Associates. Their senior partner, Evelyn Sharp, was a legend in New York. She had sued Big Pharma, Big Oil, and the government, and she usually won. She had also been fired by Victoria Harrington 20 years ago when she was a junior associate. We met her in a private conference room at the Vanguard offices. The glass walls were frosted, ensuring total privacy. Evelyn was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that could cut diamond. She listened to Arthur explain the situation, her face impassive. Then, I pushed the Project Celestia file across the table. Evelyn opened it. She saw the bank balance. She saw the evidence of the toxic dumping. She saw the tax fraud. A slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. "I have waited 2 decades for this," Evelyn said, her voice silky. "Victoria thinks she owns the legal system in this city. She is about to find out that she is merely renting it, and her lease is up." "I want to sue for everything," I said, leaning forward. "Wrongful termination, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and I want to trigger the hostile takeover clause in the trust." "We will do more than that," Evelyn said, tapping her pen on the table. "We will bleed her dry. We will file injunctions to freeze her personal assets. We will leak the environmental reports to the press carefully, of course, but first, we need to bring you into the light. You cannot sue from the shadows. Elara, you need to be seen. If I go public, she will try to kill me," I said. "She can't kill you if the whole world is watching," Evelyn countered. "If you are a ghost, you are easy to erase. If you are a celebrity, you are protected by the lens. We need to make you the most interesting person in New York by Monday morning." And so, we began the offensive. We didn't start with a press conference. That was too desperate. We started with a whisper. I attended a charity gala for the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Saturday night. It was the kind of event where a table cost $50,000. I bought 2 tables. I arrived with Liam on one arm and a team of 4 massive bodyguards flanking us. I wore a backless emerald gown that cost more than my mother's lifetime earnings. When I walked onto the red carpet, the cameras flashed, blinding and rhythmic. "Who is that?" I heard a photographer shout. "That's the mystery investor." Another whispered. "The one who just bought the agonizing debt of the transit authority." I didn't stop for interviews. I just smiled a cool, detached smile that I had practiced in the mirror for 3 hours. I walked into the ballroom, head high, looking like I owned the building. By the time the main course was served, my picture was on the homepage of every socialite blog in the city. The headline read, "The New Face of Wall Street." I knew Victoria was seeing it. I knew she was sitting in her mansion, watching the feed, her blood boiling. She couldn't send her cleanup crew here. There were too many witnesses. There were senators and judges in the room. I had built a shield out of publicity. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from Arthur, who was monitoring the police scanners back at the penthouse. "2 SUVs just circled the block. They are looking for an entry point. They found none. They are retreating." I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like victory, but the real blow was yet to be struck. The next day was Victoria Harrington's 55th birthday. Every year, She threw a lavish party at her estate in the Hamptons. Every year, she received thousands of gifts from people terrified of her or desperate for her favor. I decided to send her one more. We prepared the package in the office of Vanguard Associates. It was a simple, elegant box wrapped in black silk ribbon. Inside, there was no bomb, no threat, no poison. There was only a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of my original resume, the one that had fallen in the slush, the one she had mocked, the one that listed my mother's name and my middle name. I took a red pen and wrote a single sentence across the top, in bold. Sweeping letters. You missed out on the best employee. We hired a private courier to deliver it directly to her hand during the party. I wasn't there to see it, but Liam had a source inside the catering staff. He told me about it later that night as we sat on the terrace of the penthouse, watching the city lights. She opened it right before the toast, Liam said, lighting a cigarette. She was standing on the grand staircase, holding a glass of vintage bubbly. She opened the box, took out the paper, and read it. "And?" I asked, leaning forward. And she went pale. Liam said, "Not angry, pale, like she had seen a ghost." She dropped the glass. It shattered everywhere. The whole room went silent. She just stared at that piece of paper like it was a death warrant. "It is," I said softly. Liam looked at me. "She knows now. Elara, the game has changed. She knows you aren't just hiding. She knows you are coming for her." "Good," I said. "Let her be afraid. Let her wonder which shadow holds the knife." For 30 years, my family lived in fear of her. Tonight, for the first time, Victoria Harrington is going to sleep with the lights on. My phone rang. It was Evelyn. "The lawsuit has been filed," Evelyn said, her voice crisp. "The court papers will be served to her at 9 in the morning. And Elara, yes. We just got a call from the board of directors of Harrington Global. They saw the news about the mystery investor and the rumors about the trust. They want a meeting." I smiled. The fortress was breached. "Tell them I'm busy," I said. "Tell them I'll see them in court." I hung up and looked at the resume I had framed on the wall of the penthouse, the original one, dried and crinkled. It was no longer a symbol of my failure. It was the declaration of my war. The victim was dead. The hunt had begun. They say the truth sets you free, but in New York City, the truth is just another commodity that can be short-sold, bundled, and traded for public opinion. I learned this the hard way on Tuesday morning, exactly 48 hours after I declared war on Victoria Harrington. I woke up feeling invincible. I had the best lawyers in the city, a bank account that looked like a telephone number, and the moral high ground. I thought that was enough. I was naive. By the time I poured my first cup of coffee, Victoria had not only returned fire, she had scorched the earth beneath my feet. It started with the tabloids. Victoria owned a significant stake in 3 of the major media conglomerates on the East Coast, and she mobilized them like a pack of starving dogs. The headlines screamed from every newsstand and flashed on every digital billboard in Times Square. "The secret life of the escort's daughter. Mental instability is the mystery heiress a danger to herself. The Vance fraud. How a disgruntled assistant is conning Wall Street." I sat at the kitchen island of the penthouse, scrolling through the articles on my tablet, my hands trembling. They hadn't just attacked me, that I could handle. They had dug up my mother. They had found grainy, out-of-context photos of her from the 80s, spinning a narrative that she was a gold-digging predator who had seduced Elias Harrington and then tried to blackmail him. They claimed I was the result of a transaction, not a relationship. They claimed my mother died of a drug overdose, not untreated pneumonia caused by poverty. It was a lie, a vicious, calculated, billion-dollar lie. "Don't read the comments," Liam warned. Walking into the kitchen, he snatched the tablet from my hands. "They are calling her a whore." "Liam," I whispered, my voice cracking. "They are saying I belong in a psychiatric ward. They are saying the resume I sent her was a manifesto of a stalker." "This is the playbook," Liam said grimly. "Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender." She is trying to discredit the witness before you ever step foot in a courtroom. If the jury hates you before the trial starts, facts don't matter. We need to respond, I said, standing up. I need to sue them for libel. We will, Arthur said from the living room, where he was pacing. But a libel suit takes 2 years. Public opinion takes 2 minutes. We have a meeting at Vanguard in an hour. We need to weather this storm. I dressed in my armor, the sharp blazer, the high heels, but I felt naked. The confidence I had built over the weekend was fracturing. The real ambush happened outside the Vanguard Associates building. When our black SUV pulled up to the curb, I expected the usual paparazzi. I was prepared for flashbulbs. I was not prepared for the mob. There were 50 or 60 people crowded behind the barricades, holding signs, fraud, liar, protect the Harrington legacy. They were paid agitators. I knew that logically, but the hatred in their eyes looked terrifiedly real. Keep your head down, the head of my security detail barked into his earpiece. Move fast. Don't engage. I stepped out of the car. The noise was deafening. A wall of booing and shouting hit me like a physical wave. Go back to the gutter, someone screamed. How much did you steal? Another yelled. I tried to keep my face impassive, tried to channel the icy demeanor of a CEO, but then something wet and heavy struck the side of my head. It cracked against my temple and exploded. Raw egg yolk and shell dripped down my cheek, ruining my hair, soaking into the collar of my $3,000 coat. I gasped, stumbling in my heels. Another egg hit my shoulder. Then a tomato splattered against the glass door of the office building just inches from my face. Get her inside. Move. The bodyguards shoved me through the revolving doors. The sound of the mob was cut off instantly by the thick glass, replaced by the hushed, sterile silence of the lobby. I stood there, breathing hard, egg yolk sliding down my neck like slime. The receptionist looked at me with wide, horrified eyes. I saw my reflection in the polished marble wall. I didn't look like a winner. I looked like a dirty, humiliated girl who had tried to rise above her station and been slapped back down. I didn't go to the meeting. I couldn't. Take me home, I told the guards. Now. Back at the penthouse, I collapsed. I locked myself in the master bathroom and sat on the cold tile floor, still wearing the ruined coat. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I felt a hollow, aching numbness. Victoria had won. She hadn't used a gun or a lawyer. She had used shame. She had turned the world against me so thoroughly that I was afraid to walk out my own front door. A knock came at the door. Go away, I said. Open the door. Elara. Liam's voice was low and firm. I said go away. It's over. I can't do this. She is too big. She is too mean. I can't fight the whole world. There was a silence. Then I heard the click of the lock being picked. Of course. Liam knew how to pick locks. The door swung open. Liam stood there. He didn't look sympathetic. He looked angry. He walked over, grabbed me by the arms, and hauled me to my feet. Look at me, he commanded. I'm a mess, I choked out, wiping the yolk from my face. They hate me. Liam, everyone hates me. You think this is hate? Liam asked. He began to unbutton his shirt. What are you doing? I asked, confused. He pulled his shirt open. I gasped, running diagonally across his chest. From his left shoulder to his right hip was a thick, jagged scar. It looked like the skin had been melted and stitched back together by a blind man. It was old, but it was brutal. 3 years ago, Liam said, his voice devoid of self-pity. I was getting close to a source who worked in Harrington's accounting department. I came home one night and found 3 men in my apartment. They didn't just beat me, Elara. They threw me through a glass coffee table and then dragged me across the shards. They told me if I ever typed the name Harrington again, the next cut would be across my throat. I reached out, my fingers hovering over the scar but not daring to touch it. Oh my God. I laid on that floor for 6 hours bleeding out, Liam said, buttoning his shirt back up. I lost my job. I lost my fiancée. I lost my reputation. But do you know what I didn't lose? He grabbed my shoulders again, his eyes burning into mine. I didn't lose my anger. Victoria gave me this scar to silence me. Instead, she gave me a map. Every time I look in the mirror, I remember exactly who she is. She is a bully, and bullies don't escalate unless they are terrified. He wiped a smear of egg from my cheek with his thumb. She humiliated you today because you scared her yesterday. Pain is fuel, Alara. Burn it. Don't drown in it. Something inside me clicked. The numbness evaporated, replaced by a heat that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. Liam was right. I was sitting here feeling sorry for myself while Victoria was popping champagne. She wanted me to hide. She wanted me to be the victim. I'm not going to hide, I said, my voice stealing. And I'm not going to let her tell my story. I walked out of the bathroom and into the living area where Arthur was pacing. Set up the camera, I told Liam. For a press statement, Arthur asked. Alara, we should draft a response with Evelyn first. No press statement, I said. No lawyers, no scripts. She controls the press. She buys the headlines. So we are going to bypass them. We are going live stream. That is risky, Arthur warned. If you say the wrong thing, you could compromise the lawsuit. I'm not going to talk about the lawsuit, I said, walking to the pile of my old belongings, the box I had saved from the car. I dug through it until I found the object I needed. I'm going to talk about the cold. 10 minutes later, we were live. We didn't use a professional setup. We used a simple tripod and my phone, streaming to every major social platform simultaneously. I didn't change my clothes. I didn't fix my hair. I sat on a stool in front of a blank white wall, wearing the coat stained with egg and dirt. The viewer count started at 0, then 100, then 5,000. The haters flooded in first, spewing vitriol in the chat. But I ignored them. I looked directly into the lens. My name is Alara Vance, I began. And 3 nights ago, I was sleeping in the parking lot of a motel off Route 9. I held up the resume, the real one, the one that was wrinkled, water-damaged, and stained with the grime of that night. You have read a lot about me today, I said. You have read that I am a fraud. You have read that my mother was a bad woman. But the people writing those stories are sitting in heated offices on the top floors of skyscrapers. They have never known what it is like to choose between buying gas to run the heater or buying a sandwich. I took a breath. The viewer count hit 50,000. This piece of paper, I said, shaking the resume slightly. It fell into a puddle of slush. I crawled on my hands and knees to pick it up, because it was the only thing I had left that said I was a person, that I had value. When my grandfather, Elias Harrington, left me this trust, he didn't do it because he loved me. He never met me. He did it because he knew his family would try to crush me, and he was right. I leaned in closer to the camera. Victoria Harrington sent people to throw eggs at me today. She paid magazines to spit on my mother's grave. Why? Because she is afraid of a resume. She is afraid that you will see that the person running her company isn't a genius. She is just a bully who inherited a throne. I looked at the chat. It was moving so fast it was a blur, but the tone was shifting. The insults were being drowned out by questions, by shock. I am not asking for your pity, I said, my voice hardening. I am telling you that I am here. I am the rightful heir, and I am not going back to the parking lot. If you want to know the truth, don't read the tabloids. Look at the bank accounts. Look at the toxic waste reports in West Virginia. Look at the scars on the people who tried to speak up before me. I ended the stream. For a full minute, the room was silent. You have 2 million views, Liam whispered, staring at the metrics, and climbing. Then, the internet exploded. It wasn't just a ripple. It was a tidal wave. The hashtag I Stand With Alara began to trend on Twitter, then TikTok. People started sharing their own stories of being bullied by corporations, of being fired unjustly. The image of me in the ruined coat, holding the dirty resume, became an instant icon of resistance. It was raw. It was real. It was everything the polished, airbrushed Harrington brand was not. Arthur smiled. It was a vicious, satisfied smile. "It is time for the second punch," he said. Arthur logged into his encrypted server and released a single file to 3 major independent news outlets that Victoria couldn't buy. It was a scan of a handwritten letter from Victoria to Elias Harrington, dated 2 weeks before his death. "Sign the power of attorney, old man, or I will instruct the nurses to withhold the pain medication again. No one is coming to save you. You are going to die in pain, and I am going to take it all." The letter was authenticated by Arthur's notary seal and a forensic handwriting analysis. The reaction was instantaneous. The Harrington Group's stock price, which had been holding steady, fell off a cliff. It dropped 8% in 20 minutes. Institutional investors started panic selling. The board of directors, the same ones who had snubbed me, were now blowing up Evelyn's phone. "She is bleeding," Liam said, watching the financial news. "Look at the ticker. She just lost $400 million in market cap in an hour." Then, the inevitable happened. The news broke that Victoria Harrington would be holding an emergency press conference at the Harrington Tower. We turned on the massive television in the living room. Victoria stood at a podium. She looked impeccable, as always, but her eyes were tight. Her makeup was a little too heavy. She was flanked by lawyers. "These accusations are baseless," Victoria said, her voice wavering slightly, a calculated tremor to induce sympathy. "This is a coordinated attack by a disturbed young woman and a disgruntled former employee. The letter is a forgery. I loved my father. I have dedicated my life to this company. It breaks my heart to see his legacy dragged through the mud." She wiped a tear from her eye. It was a masterful performance. But then, a reporter from the back of the room, one of the few independent journalists allowed in, shouted a question. "Ms. Harrington, if the letter is a forgery, why did your own handwriting expert authenticate it in a private deposition in 1999? Victoria froze. Her mask slipped for a fraction of a second. She looked like a trapped animal. "This conference is over," her lawyer snapped. Stepping in front of the microphone, Victoria was hustled off the stage, but the cameras caught it. They caught the fear. They caught the moment the Queen realized the peasants had stormed the castle. In the penthouse, Liam popped the tab on a soda can. It sounded like a gunshot. "She took the bait," Liam said. "She went on TV to deny it, which means she just validated the story for the entire world." Arthur sat back in his chair, folding his hands over his stomach. "She is no longer fighting a legal battle, Alara. She is fighting for her survival." I looked at the screen, at the empty podium where my stepmother had just stood. I touched the dried egg on my hair. It didn't feel like shame anymore. It felt like war paint. "She thinks this is the worst of it," I said softly, "but we haven't even opened the black box yet." "No," Liam agreed, "but now we know where she is vulnerable. She cares more about her image than her money, and we just smashed the mirror." The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the room. The cold was still out there, waiting, but inside, the fire was burning brighter than ever. I wasn't the girl in the parking lot anymore. I was the storm knocking at Victoria's door. The air in the penthouse, once crisp with the scent of expensive lilies and victory, had turned stale. It smelled of cold coffee and paranoia. For 3 days, we had been losing, not just stumbling, but hemorrhaging ground in a way that defied statistical probability. Every motion Evelyn filed was countered within hours by Harrington's legal team, citing precedents so obscure that it would take weeks to find them unless you knew exactly where to look. Every leak we planned to the press was preempted by a puff piece on Victoria's philanthropy released 20 minutes beforehand. It was as if they were reading our playbook before the ink was dry. I stood by the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. The city looked gray and hostile again. "They anticipated the move on the shell companies," Evelyn said, her voice tight over the speakerphone. She sounded exhausted. "We filed the injunction to freeze their offshore assets at 9 in the morning. By 9:15, their lawyers had a counter motion ready, claiming jurisdictional overreach. They didn't just react, Alara. They were waiting." "How?" I asked. gripping the edge of the marble table until my knuckles turned white. We only finalized that strategy at midnight last night, in this room. I don't know, Evelyn admitted, but there is worse news. My stomach dropped. What? The judge granted a temporary restraining order on the trust fund. Evelyn said, Victoria's team submitted an affidavit this morning. They are claiming the resume you used to unlock the account, the one with the dates and the middle name, is a digital fabrication. They have a forensic expert willing to testify that the ink on the original document is less than a week old. That is a lie, I shouted, the panic rising in my throat. It has been in my car for months. Arthur saw it. It doesn't matter if it is a lie, Evelyn said grimly. It matters that it creates reasonable doubt. The court has frozen the $450 million pending a full forensic inquiry. It could take months, Elara, maybe a year. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, frozen. The money was gone. Not stolen, but locked behind a wall of bureaucracy that I couldn't climb without money. The reality hit me an hour later when the head of my private security detail, a massive man named Corbin, knocked on the door. He didn't look me in the eye. Ms. Vance, the agency attempted to run the weekly retainer charge. It was declined. It's a banking error, I lied, my voice shaking. I can fix it by tomorrow. I'm sorry, Corbin said, and for the first time, he looked at the expensive watch on his wrist. Our orders are strict. No payment, no protection. We are pulling out. You can't leave, I pleaded, stepping toward him. She knows where I am. If you leave, I'm defenseless. I'm sorry, he repeated. 5 minutes later, the penthouse was empty. The 4 guards who had been my shadow, my shield against the world, were gone. The silence they left behind was deafening. I was not just broke again, I was exposed. Then the phone rang. It wasn't Evelyn. It was a restricted number. I picked it up, expecting Victoria's gloating voice. Ms. Vance, a stranger's voice. Urgent, clinical. This is St. Luke's Hospital. We found your number in the emergency contact list of a Mr. Arthur Sterling. The world tilted on its axis. Arthur, is he okay? He was struck by a vehicle while crossing 42nd Street, the voice said. It was a hit and run. He is in critical condition. He is in surgery now. But you should come. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. Arthur, the only man who had looked at me with kindness, the only father figure I had ever known, a hit and run, on a Tuesday afternoon, in the middle of Manhattan. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. I turned around, and my eyes landed on Liam. He was sitting on the couch, his laptop open, typing furiously. He hadn't reacted to the phone clattering. He looked focused, too focused. A cold, poisonous thought uncoiled in my brain. Who knew Arthur's schedule today? Me, Liam, Arthur. Who knew about the shell company strategy? Me, Evelyn, Liam, Arthur, who had been mysteriously absent for 2 hours yesterday afternoon. Claiming he needed to meet a source, Liam. The paranoia was a physical thing, a tightening of the chest that made it hard to breathe. I had trusted him because he was damaged, because he hated her, but everyone has a price. Maybe Victoria had found him. Maybe she had offered him his career back. Maybe she had offered him $10 million to hand me over. Where were you yesterday? I asked. My voice was low, trembling with a dangerous energy. Liam stopped typing. He looked up, confused. What? Yesterday, I repeated, walking toward him. Between 2 and 4 o'clock. You said you were meeting a source. Who was it? I told you, Liam said, closing his laptop slowly. It was an old contact at the Times. I was trying to get traction on the toxic waste story. Did you get it? I demanded. No, Liam said. He got cold feet. Convenient, I spat. Just like it is convenient that the security team left 10 minutes before I got the call that Arthur was run over by a car. Liam stood up, his face paling. Arthur, what happened? Don't pretend. I screamed, the tears finally spilling over. You knew. You knew where he was going. You are the only one who knew the legal strategy. How much did she pay you? Liam, how much was I worth? Liam looked at me as if I had slapped him. The hurt in his eyes was raw, but I was too terrified to trust it. You think I did this? Liam asked, his voice deadly quiet. You think I would work for her? I think I'm losing everything, I yelled, gesturing to the empty apartment. My money is frozen. My lawyer is checkmated. My grandfather's friend is dying in surgery, and you are the only variable left standing. Get out. Ilara, listen to me. Get out, I shrieked, grabbing a heavy vase from the table and hurling it at the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, just like my composure. Get out before I call the police. Liam stared at me for a long moment. His jaw worked, grinding his teeth. He didn't defend himself. He didn't beg. He just nodded, a sharp, jerky motion. Fine, he said. You want to be alone? You got it. He grabbed his jacket and walked out the door. The slam echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. I was alone, truly alone. The next 6 hours were a blur of terror and humiliation. I couldn't go to the hospital. If Victoria's men had hit Arthur, they would be waiting there for me. I was trapped in a glass cage, and I was hungry. The hotel service had cut off our credit. The fridge was empty. I went to the bedroom and opened the safe. Inside was the velvet box containing the diamond earrings and the emerald necklace I had bought for the gala. They were symbols of my new life. Now, they were just rocks. I put on a baseball cap and sunglasses. I slipped out the service entrance, terrifyingly aware of every shadow, every car that slowed down. I walked 6 blocks to a pawn shop in Hell's Kitchen that looked like it asked no questions. The broker, a greasy man with nicotine-stained fingers, looked at the emerald necklace. It was worth $50,000. 5,000, he grunted. It is Cartier, I whispered. Please. 5,000. Take it or leave it. I took it. I walked out with a roll of dirty bills in my pocket, feeling the ghost of the homeless girl from the parking lot walking beside me. She was laughing. She was telling me I never should have tried to rise. I bought a prepaid burner phone and a sandwich from a bodega. I ate it in the alley, tears mixing with the mayonnaise. I went back to the penthouse, intending to pack a bag and run. I would disappear. I would take the 5,000 and go to Idaho or Montana. I was done. The door to the penthouse was unlocked. My heart stopped. I reached into my bag, gripping the canister of pepper spray I had bought. I pushed the door open slowly. Liam was sitting at the dining table. He looked terrible. His lip was split, bleeding. His knuckles were raw. He was holding an ice pack to his left eye, which was rapidly swelling shut. I told you to get out, I whispered, though the anger had drained out of me, replaced by confusion. And I told you I'm not a babysitter, Liam mumbled through his swollen lip. I'm a journalist, and journalists check their sources. He slid a manila folder across the table. It wasn't the Celestia file. It was something new. I didn't meet a source yesterday, Liam admitted. I was following someone. I had a hunch. Evelyn is clean. Ilara, but her team isn't. I walked over and opened the folder. Inside were photos, grainy, taken with a long lens camera. They showed a young man in a sharp suit sitting at a cafe table. Across from him was a man I recognized instantly, the head of Victoria's cleanup crew. The young man was handing over a USB drive. Who is he? I asked. Julian Marks, Liam said. Evelyn's senior paralegal, the guy who organizes her files, the guy who types up the motions before they are filed. He sold us out, I breathed. For $100,000, Liam said. I found the offshore transfer record. I had to beat it out of a low-level banker in Queens, hence the face. He pointed to his black eye. But I got it. I looked at Liam. He was battered, bruised, and exhausted. He had taken a beating for me. He had come back even after I threw him out. I dropped into the chair next to him. Liam, Don't apologize, he said roughly. You were scared. Paranoia is what she wants. It creates cracks. But now we know where the leak is. He opened a beer and took a sip, wincing. So, do we call Evelyn? Has he been fired? I looked at the photo of Julian Marks. I looked at the smug expression on his face as he sold my life for a paycheck. A thought began to form. It was cold. It was calculating. It was exactly the kind of thought Victoria Harrington would have. "No," I said. "We don't fire him." Liam looked at me, one eye squinting. "What? If we fire him, Victoria will know we found the leak," I said, my voice steadying. "She will find another way in, but right now, she trusts him. She thinks his information is gold." I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The city lights were coming on, one by one. "We are going to use him," I said. "Feed him disinformation," Liam asked, sitting up straighter. "We are going to give him the story Victoria wants to hear most," I said. "We are going to make her believe she has won." I turned back to Liam. "Draft a document," I ordered. "Make it look like a confidential email from me to Evelyn. Subject line, settlement negotiation." "What are you offering?" Liam asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Tell her I am broken," I said, pacing the room. "Tell her the freeze on the assets worked. Tell her I can't afford security anymore. Tell her I'm willing to drop the lawsuit, renounce the trust, and sign a non-disclosure agreement." "In exchange for what?" $10 million, I said. "Cash, and safe passage out of the country." "She will buy that," Liam nodded. "It fits her narrative. She thinks you are a desperate little girl who got in over her head." "And tell her," I added, my eyes narrowing, "that I want to meet in person to sign, no lawyers, just me and her, to ensure there is no record. Where?" I thought about the places that frightened me, the parking lot, the alleyways. Then I thought about the one place where Victoria felt powerful. The industrial district where her warehouses were, where nobody went at night. "Tell her I am hiding at the old shipping warehouse on Pier 40, I said. "Tell her I will be there at midnight tomorrow." Liam typed it out. He looked up at me, a grin spreading across his bruised face. "You are setting a trap," he said. "She wants to erase me," I said, touching the pocket where my cheap burner phone sat. "I'm going to give her the chance, but when she opens that door, she isn't going to find a scared girl." "What is she going to find?" Liam asked. I looked at the reflection in the window, the short hair, the sharp eyes, the person forged in the fire of the last 3 days. "The consequences," I said. "Send the email to Julian," I commanded. "Let him earn his blood money." Liam hit send. The digital packet flew through the ether, landing in the inbox of a traitor who would forward it to a tyrant. The bait was in the water. Now, we just had to wait for the shark. The warehouse on Pier 40 was a cathedral of rust and rot. It jutted out into the Hudson River like a broken finger, smelling of diesel, brine, and decades of abandonment. The wind howled through gaps in the corrugated metal roof, a mournful sound that masked the rapid beating of my own heart. I sat on a wooden crate in the center of the vast, empty floor. I had spent 2 hours preparing for this performance. I had washed off my makeup, leaving my face pale and exposed. I had used a dark eyeshadow to create hollows under my eyes that mimicked sleeplessness. I wore my old jeans and an oversized, threadbare sweater, the clothes of a victim, not a CEO. I looked small. I looked broken. I looked exactly like the girl Victoria Harrington wanted to see. Hidden in the shadows of the catwalks 40 feet above me, Liam lay prone in a sniper's nest. But he wasn't holding a rifle. He was holding a high-definition directional camera and a wireless transmitter linked to a dedicated 5G node we had installed hours ago. "She is here," Liam's voice crackled in the tiny earpiece deeply embedded in my ear canal. 3 black SUVs, approaching the south gate, no police presence detected on their scanners. "She feels safe." "Copy," I whispered, my lips barely moving. "Is the feed live?" "We are live to the private server," Liam confirmed. "Waiting for your signal to broadcast." I pulled my knees to my chest, feigning a shiver. The headlights of the lead SUV cut through the gloom of the warehouse, blinding white beams that swept over the dust motes dancing in the air. The engines growled expensive, heavy engines before cutting out simultaneously. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with violence. Car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps echoed on the concrete. Then, she stepped into the light. Victoria Harrington looked like she was attending a funeral for a rival she hated. She wore a black trench coat made of cashmere that probably cost more than the warehouse itself. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the oil-stained floor. She was flanked by 4 men, her personal guard. These weren't the standard security. These were the giants who broke bones for a living. One of them carried a metal briefcase. Another held a thick legal folder. Victoria stopped 10 feet away from me. She looked down, her lip curling in a sneer of absolute victory. "Look at you," she purred, her voice echoing in the vast space. "Back in the filth. It suits you, Elara. It really does." I looked up, making sure my hands trembled visibly. "Did you bring the money?" Victoria laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Always the beggar. Just like your mother. Yes, I brought the money. $10 million. Enough for you to disappear to some third-world hole and drink yourself to death." She snapped her fingers. The guard with the briefcase stepped forward and slammed it onto a rusty oil drum. He popped the latches. Inside, stacks of used bills were packed tight. It smelled of ink and greed. "And the agreement?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Right here." Victoria took the folder from the other guard. She threw it at my feet. It landed with a dull thud in the dust. "Standard terms. You admit the resume was forged. You admit the claim on the trust was a fraudulent attempt to extort the family. You sign away all rights to the name Harrington, Vance, and Celestia, and then you leave the country tonight." I reached for the folder, my fingers brushing the dirty concrete. "And if I sign, you promise to leave me alone. You promise not to hurt me." Victoria took a step closer. Looming over me, she felt safe here. She felt powerful. This was her mistake. "Hurt you?" Victoria mocked. "Darling, if I wanted to hurt you physically, you would already be at the bottom of the Hudson. I don't want to break your bones. I want to break your spirit. I want you to know that you never stood a chance." I paused, my hand on the pen. "Why?" I whispered. "Why did you hate us so much? My mother never asked for anything. I never asked for anything." "Your mother was a stain," Victoria spat, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the venom underneath. "She thought she could charm my father. She thought her love mattered. She didn't understand that the Harrington Empire is built on blood, not sentiment." "So you killed her reputation," I said, leading her. "You told the press she was a whore." I told the press what they needed to hear to protect the stock price. Victoria shrugged. "Just like I told the doctors to ignore your grandfather's pleas when his heart began to fail. He was going to give it all away. Elara, to you, to charity. I couldn't let a senile old man dismantle a century of work." "And Arthur?" I asked, looking up at her. "He was an old man too. Did he have to die?" Victoria sighed, examining her manicured fingernails. "Arthur was a loose end. I offered him a retirement package 5 years ago. He refused. He chose to hold on to that ridiculous file. The accident on 42nd Street was unfortunate, but necessary, just like this meeting." "You admit it," I said softly. "You admit you ordered the hit on Arthur." Victoria leaned down, her face inches from mine. Her eyes were hard, black stones. "Who is going to hear me?" "Elara. The rats. These men work for me. They would bury you right here if I nodded my head. Yes, I ordered it. Just like I ordered the bank to freeze your accounts. Just like I ordered the fabrication of the forensic evidence against you. I own the board. I own the narrative. I own the truth." She stood up and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a single, crisp $100 bill. "Now," she said, dropping the bill onto the dirty floor next to the contract. "Sign the paper, but before you do pick that up," I stared at the bill. It lay in a patch of oil, green and mocking. "Pick it up," Victoria commanded, her voice rising. "On your knees. Show me that you understand your place. You are the help. Elara, you are the maid's daughter. You exist to clean up my mess." I looked at the bill. Then I looked at the contract. Slowly, painfully. I got to my knees. The concrete bit into my skin. Victoria smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated evil. She believed she had won. She believed she had finally crushed the last threat to her throne. I reached out. My hand hovered over the money. Then, I stopped. I looked up at her. The trembling in my hands ceased. The fear in my eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, burning fire that matched the one inside me. "Victoria," I said, my voice steady and loud. "Did you check the place?" Victoria frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "What?" "The warehouse," I said, standing up slowly, brushing the dust from my knees. "Did you check the wiring?" "What are you talking about?" She took a step back, sensing the shift in the air. "Liam," I said into the silence, "hit the lights." Clang. High above us, a row of industrial floodlights slammed on with a blinding intensity. The sudden brightness was disorienting. Victoria flinched, shielding her eyes. Her guards reached for the weapons inside their jackets. "Don't move," I shouted. "Look at the wall behind you." Victoria spun around. One entire wall of the warehouse was covered in a white projection screen that we had rigged earlier, but it wasn't blank. It was showing a live feed. It was a split screen. On the left was the interior of the warehouse, showing Victoria, the guards, and the briefcase of cash perfectly framed. On the right was a live shot of Times Square. I watched the color drain from Victoria's face as she saw herself on the screen. The massive, curved LED screens in Times Square. The ones that usually showed advertisements for Coke and Nike were broadcasting our feed. Thousands of tourists in Manhattan were looking up, watching Victoria Harrington standing in a warehouse, confessing to murder and fraud. "We aren't just broadcasting to the rats, Victoria," I said, my voice ringing with triumph. "We are broadcasting to the world. You just confessed to conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice, and you did it on a live stream with 4 million concurrent viewers." "No," Victoria whispered. She looked at the screen, then back at me. "No." "Cut the feed," she screamed at her guards. "Kill her. Kill her now." The guards hesitated. They were mercenaries, not suicide bombers. They looked at the cameras. They looked at the live feed showing their own faces being broadcast to the NYPD. "I wouldn't do that," a voice boomed from the darkness of the loading dock. The massive steel doors rolled up. Blue and red lights flooded the warehouse, drowning out the white floodlights. Sirens wailed, a cacophony of justice. Dozens of NYPD tactical officers poured in, rifles raised, shields up. Behind them walked the police commissioner himself, looking grim. He had seen the feed. He had no choice but to act. "Drop your weapons," the police shouted. "On the ground, now." The bodyguards looked at Victoria, then at the SWAT team. They made the calculation instantly. They threw their guns on the floor and raised their hands. Victoria stood alone, the queen without her pawns. "It's over, Victoria," I said, stepping toward her. "The game is done." Victoria looked around wildly. She looked at the police closing in. She looked at me, and then a look of pure, destructive madness crossed her face. "You think you've won?" she hissed. She reached into her coat pocket. "Gun." A police officer shouted, "Drop it." But she didn't pull out a gun. She pulled out a sleek black remote device, the Scorched Earth Protocol. She smiled. "It doesn't transfer the money. It deletes the encryption keys to the accounts. Without them, the money is lost forever." Arthur had warned me about the Scorched Earth Protocol, a fail-safe designed to liquidate the company's liquid assets and scatter them into thousands of untraceable cryptocurrency wallets in the event of a hostile takeover. It was financial suicide, but it would leave the company a hollow shell. "Victoria, don't!" I lunged forward. She smiled a rictus of hate, and she pressed the button, authorized. "It's gone," she whispered, just as a police officer tackled her to the concrete. "It's all gone." The phone skittered across the floor. Landing at my feet, the screen glowed with a final message, Transfer complete. Assets liquidated. I stared at the phone. The police were cuffing her. She was laughing, a high, hysterical sound that echoed off the metal walls. "You have the crown, Elara," she shrieked as they dragged her up. "But it's made of tin. I burned the kingdom. I burned it all." They hauled her away, kicking and screaming, past the briefcase of $10 million that now sat ignored on the oil drum. I stood frozen in the chaos. The police were securing the scene. Liam rappelled down from the catwalk, landing beside me. He looked exhilarated, his camera still rolling. "We got her," Liam said, grabbing my shoulder. "Did you see that? The confession, the arrest. It's the story of the century. Elara, we won." I looked at him, then down at the phone on the floor. "Did we?" I whispered. I picked up the phone. The Harrington Group accounts were empty. The $450 million in the trust, if she had linked it to the main mainframe like Arthur suspected, might have been swept up in the liquidity purge. The company I had just fought to reclaim was now bankrupt. "Elara?" Liam asked, sensing my mood. "She transferred it," I said, my voice hollow. "She moved the money. It's overseas. It's in crypto. It's gone." Liam looked at the phone, then back at the retreating figure of Victoria being shoved into a police cruiser. "She's going to prison for life," Liam said. "That matters." "Does it?" I asked, looking around the rotting warehouse. I had justice. I had the truth. I had my name back. But as I stood there in the cold, clutching the phone that had just wiped out a legacy, I realized that Victoria had been right about one thing. The winter was very cold, and even with her in handcuffs, I was still standing in the draft without a coat. The war was over, but the wreckage was just beginning. The heart monitor in the ICU at St. Luke's Hospital was keeping a frantic rhythm that matched my own pulse. Arthur Sterling lay in the bed, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His skin was the color of parchment, and tubes snaked from his arms like translucent vines. But his eyes were open, and they were burning with a desperate, lucid intelligence. "It is not gone, Elara," Arthur wheezed, his voice barely audible over the hiss of the oxygen machine. "Not yet." I gripped the bed rail, my knuckles white. It was 3:30 in the afternoon. Victoria was in custody, but the damage was already bleeding through the digital veins of the global banking system. I saw the screen. "Arthur," I said, my voice tight. It said transfer complete. The accounts are zeroed out. "That is the liquidity protocol," Arthur coughed, wincing in pain. "It moves the capital from the primary holding accounts to a staging server in the Cayman Islands. It sits there for 2 hours for fierce compliance checks before it scatters into the blockchain. It is a buffer, a failsafe." He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "You have until 5 o'clock. When the markets close, the buffer expires. The money vanishes forever." "How do I stop it?" I asked. "I don't have the passwords." Victoria wiped the credentials. "Not the digital credentials," Arthur rasped. "The physical override. Elias didn't trust computers. He built a kill switch. It is in the vault of the Swiss private bank on Fifth Avenue. It requires a biometric handshake, a living pulse from a Celestia air." I looked at the clock on the wall. 3:45. "I have an hour and 15 minutes, I said. "I can make it." "You have to," Arthur whispered, his eyes sliding shut as the morphine took hold again. "Run, Elara, run." I sprinted out of the hospital entrance. My phone pressed to my ear. Liam was on the line, his voice surrounded by the chaotic noise of a server room. He was at the FBI Cyber Division headquarters, coordinating with the feds. "Liam, I need a route to 5th and 52nd, I shouted, jumping into the back of the police cruiser the commissioner had assigned to me at the warehouse. "I have to get to the Swiss bank vault before 5. "Driver, go," I yelled at the officer behind the wheel. "Sirens now." The cruiser lurched forward, lights flashing. We tore down Amsterdam Avenue, weaving through the afternoon traffic. For 5 minutes, I thought we would make it. Then, we hit the wall. At the intersection of 42nd Street and 8th Avenue, the world stopped. It wasn't just traffic, it was total, paralyzed gridlock. Every traffic light as far as the eye could see was stuck on red. Cars were honking, drivers were getting out of their vehicles, and the sound was a deafening cacophony of frustration. "What is going on?" I screamed into the phone. "It's a cyber attack." Liam's voice came through, sounding strained. Victoria's failsafe didn't just trigger the money transfer. It released a worm into the city's traffic management grid. She paralyzed the city. Alara, she knew you would try to get to the bank. She blocked the board. The police driver slammed his hand on the steering wheel. "I can't move. Ms. Vance, we are boxed in, even with sirens. There is nowhere for these cars to go." I looked out the window. It was a sea of metal. The bank was 20 blocks away. I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. 4:10. 50 minutes. 20 blocks. In a city that was fighting me every inch of the way. "I'm getting out," I told the officer. "Ms. Vance, I can't let you—" I didn't listen. I threw the door open and stepped out into the chaotic street. The cold air hit me like a slap, biting through my thin sweater. I was still dressed in my warehouse disguised jeans and cheap boots that were never designed for speed. "Liam," I said into the phone, starting to jog. "Tell me exactly where to go." "Run north on 8th, Liam directed, his voice typing furiously in the background. "But listen to me. Alara, it's not just traffic. Her hackers are tracking your phone location. They are trying to lock you out of the banking system remotely. I am fighting them, but they are rewriting the access codes as we speak. If they blacklist your biometric profile before you touch that scanner, it won't matter if you are standing in the vault." "Just buy me time," I yelled. Breaking into a full sprint, I weaved between the stalled cars, ignoring the shouts of angry drivers. My breath plumed in white clouds before me. My legs, already exhausted from the adrenaline crash at the warehouse, screamed in protest. 4:20. I hit 46th Street and cut toward Broadway. The sidewalks were packed with tourists who were staring at the frozen traffic, unaware that a $450 million fortune was evaporating above their heads. I tried to dodge a hot dog vendor cart and twisted my ankle. Pain shot up my leg. Sharp and blinding, I stumbled, crashing into a metal newsstand. "Watch it, lady," someone shouted. I gasped, looking down at my boots. The heel of the right boot had snapped off. I didn't think. I sat on the freezing pavement and tore the boots off. I threw them into the gutter. "Alara, what are you doing?" Liam asked, hearing the commotion. "Shedding weight," I gritted out. I stood up. My socks were thin cotton. The pavement was wet, icy, and covered in the filth of a New York winter. The cold attacked the soles of my feet instantly. A sharp, stinging bite that turned into a numb ache within seconds. I started running again, barefoot. The sensory details of the city became a nightmare. I felt every crack in the sidewalk, every pebble, every shard of glass. But the physical pain was grounding. It was better than the fear. 4:30. Status. I yelled, dodging a businessman who was too busy looking at his phone to move. "The transfer is at 85% completion," Liam said, his voice tight with panic. "I have the FBI trying to DDoS the staging server to slow it down, but the connection is encrypted with military-grade protocols. Alara, you have 20 minutes. Are you close?" "I'm at Rockefeller Center," I panted, my lungs burning. The giant Christmas tree was a blur of lights to my right. 5 blocks? "Security at the bank is on high alert," Liam warned. "The system is flashing red. They have locked the main doors. You are going to have to talk your way in." "I'll handle it," I said, turning the corner onto Fifth Avenue. The wind on Fifth Avenue was brutal. It acted like a tunnel, channeling the freezing gusts straight into my face. My feet were numb blocks of ice. I could feel something warm and wet on my left sole blood, but I couldn't stop to look. I saw the bank. It was a fortress of limestone and brass, imposing and impenetrable. The revolving doors were still, and 2 armed guards stood behind the glass. Looking tense, I sprinted the last 100 yards, my chest heaving. I slammed my hands against the glass doors. "Open up," I screamed. "Open the door." The guard shook his head, pointing to his wrist. Closed. Emergency lockdown. I am Alara Vance, I shouted, my voice cracking. I am the chairman. Open this door. The guard looked at me. He saw a woman with wild hair, wearing dirty jeans and a torn sweater, standing barefoot in the snow, bleeding onto his pristine welcome mat. He saw a crazy person. Step away from the glass, ma'am, he said through the intercom. Or I will call the police. Liam, I shrieked. They won't let me in. I can't hack the door, Liam said, sounding defeated. It is a hard line, air-gapped. I looked at the clock tower down the street. 4:55, 5 minutes. 300 seconds until Victoria won, until she sat in her cell and laughed while my legacy burned. I looked down at myself. I had nothing. No wallet, no ID, no phone that proved anything other than a GPS signal. Then, Arthur's voice echoed in my memory from that first day in his office. The resume. Alara, it isn't just a piece of paper. I reached into the inside pocket of my coat. My fingers brushed against the stiff, water-damaged linen paper. I pulled it out. It was battered. The ink was smeared in places. It looked like trash. I pressed it against the glass door. Look at it, I screamed at the guard. Look at the back. The guard frowned, annoyed. He started to turn away. Turn it over, I begged, flipping the paper against the glass. On the back of the resume, in the bottom right corner, was a faint, square watermark. To the naked eye, it looked like a discoloration from the printer. But Arthur had said it. I updated the file. Scan it, I yelled. Scan the watermark. The guard hesitated. He looked at my desperate eyes. Then he looked at the paper. He pulled a handheld scanner from his belt, the kind used for high-security clearance badges. He held it up to the glass. A red laser beam swept across the dirty paper. Beep! The LED light on the scanner didn't turn red. It didn't turn yellow. It turned a brilliant, pulsing blue. The heavy locks on the door clicked open with a sound like a gunshot. The guard stared at his scanner, his jaw dropping. The display read, Priority 1 access. Chairman designate. He pushed the door open. Ma'am, I didn't know. Move, I gasped. Shoving past him, I ran across the marble lobby, leaving bloody footprints on the polished floor. The vault, I shouted. Where's the elevator? Straight back. Use the keycard. The guard threw me his own master pass. I caught it and slammed it against the elevator reader. The doors slid open. I punched the button for the sub-basement. The descent took forever. 4:57. Liam, status, I whispered, leaning against the cold metal wall of the elevator, trying to catch my breath. 98%, Liam said. It's finalizing. Alara, you have seconds, literal seconds. The elevator doors opened. The vault room was silent and sterile, bathed in blue light. In the center stood a terminal that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. It had no keyboard, no screen, just a single panel of black glass, a biometric reader. I ran to it. My hands were shaking so badly I was afraid I couldn't hold them steady. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Place your right hand on the panel, a computerized voice intoned. Verify identity. I slammed my hand down on the cold glass. Nothing happened. Error, the voice said. Reading obscured. I looked at my hand. It was dirty, covered in the grime of the warehouse and the sweat of the run. No, 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 I sobbed. I wiped my palm frantically on my jeans, scrubbing it raw. 99%, Liam warned. Alara, I placed my hand down again, pressing until my bones hurt. Verify identity, the voice repeated. A beam of light scanned under my skin, reading the vein patterns, the unique map of my blood that linked me to Elias Harrington. Processing, the seconds stretched into eternity. I closed my eyes. I saw the parking lot. I saw the snow. I saw Arthur in the hospital bed. Identity verified. Alara Celestia Vance. Authorization code accepted. Override command initiated. A loud mechanical klaxon blared in the room. On the wall, a digital display that I hadn't noticed flared to life. It showed a progress bar that was filled to the very brim, red and angry. Then, the text changed. Transaction halted. Assets frozen. Funds reverting to main trust. It stopped, Liam yelled in my ear. The sound so loud it made me flinch. It stopped, the packets are bouncing back. The staging server just locked down. I slid down the front of the terminal until I hit the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest, gasping for air, shaking uncontrollably. "We did it," I whispered. "It's safe." 30 minutes later, the adrenaline crash hit me like a physical blow. I was sitting in the bank manager's office, wrapped in a wool blanket. A medic was bandaging my feet. The pain was returning now, sharp and throbbing, but it felt distant. Liam rushed into the room, flanked by 2 FBI agents. He looked disheveled, his eyes wild. When he saw me, he didn't say a word. He just walked over and pulled me into a hug that squeezed the last bit of air out of my lungs. "You crazy barefoot lunatic," he murmured into my hair. "You actually did it." "Did we save it all?" I asked, my voice raspy. "Every penny," Liam said, pulling back to look at me. The transfer failed at 99.9%. Victoria's hackers were too slow. One of the FBI agents stepped forward. He held a tablet. "Ms. Vance," he said respectfully, "we thought you might want to see this. We have a live feed from the holding cells at the precinct." He turned the tablet toward me. The grainy black and white footage showed Victoria Harrington sitting on a metal cot. She was staring at the wall, a smug, expectant smile on her face. She was waiting for the news. She was waiting for her lawyer to come in and tell her that even though she was in prison, she had won the war. Then, her lawyer walked in. I couldn't hear the audio, but I saw the body language. The lawyer shook his head. He put a piece of paper on the table. Victoria's smile faltered. She stood up. She grabbed the lawyer by the lapels of his jacket. She screamed something, a silent, primal scream that contorted her face into a mask of pure horror. She slumped back onto the cot, staring at her hands. She looked small. She looked old, and for the first time, she looked completely powerless. "She knows," the agent said. "She knows she is broke." I looked at the woman who had haunted my nightmares for 20 years, the woman who had killed my mother with poverty and silence. "Turn it off," I said quietly. "Don't you want to watch?" Liam asked. "No," I said, pulling the blanket tighter around me. "I don't need to watch her lose. I just needed to stop her from winning." I reached into the pocket of my jeans and pulled out the resume. It was ruined now, torn at the edges, stained with blood and dirt. The QR code on the back was barely visible. I smoothed it out on the mahogany desk of the bank manager. "It really was a magic piece of paper," Liam said, tracing the edge of the document. "No," I said, looking at my bandaged feet. "It was just a resume. It only worked because I was willing to run for it." The clock on the wall chimed 5:30. Outside, the traffic was beginning to clear. The city was moving again. The world was turning, indifferent to the fact that a dynasty had just died and a new one had been born in the span of an hour. I closed my eyes and finally, for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. The Southern District of New York Federal Courthouse does not smell like justice. It smells of floor wax, old mahogany, and the cold, metallic scent of fear. For 2 months, the world had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment. They called it the trial of the century. But for me, it was simply the end of a very long, very cold winter. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my spine pressed against the hard wood of the chair. I was not wearing the torn jeans from the warehouse or the oversized sweaters of my poverty. I was wearing a suit of blinding white wool, tailored to within a millimeter of my life. It was a statement. In a room full of gray suits and black robes, I was the light that had finally broken through the cracks. Beside me, Evelyn Sharp looked like a shark smelling blood in the water. Her pen hovered over her legal pad, ready to strike. Across the aisle, Victoria Harrington sat. She looked smaller than she had in the warehouse, The prison jumpsuit had been swapped for a modest navy dress, approved by her defense team to make her look harmless, maternal even. But her eyes were the same. They were two chips of obsidian, staring at me with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical weight. "The defense calls Victoria Harrington to the stand," the bailiff announced. Victoria stood up. She walked to the witness box with a limp that I knew she didn't have. She was playing the role of the confused, victimized matriarch, her lawyer. A man named Mr. Thorne, no relation to Liam, began his questioning. "Ms. Harrington," he said, his voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. "Can you explain the events at the warehouse? The prosecution claims you confessed to murder." Victoria sniffed, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue. "It was entrapment. I was terrified. That woman." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "She lured me there. She hired thugs. I said whatever they wanted me to say because I thought they were going to kill me. I was not in my right mind. I have been under tremendous stress trying to save the company from her corporate sabotage." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The press was eating it up. The narrative of the poor widow was their last-ditch effort. Evelyn leaned toward me. "She is good," she whispered. "I am better," I replied. "Put me up there." When it was my turn to take the stand, the room went silent. I walked past Victoria. For a second, our eyes met. She mouthed a single word: "Dirt." I sat down and placed my hands on my lap. I didn't look at the jury. I looked at the judge. "Ms. Vance," Victoria's lawyer began, pacing in front of me like a predator. "You claim to be the rightful heir. Yet, for 26 years, you were a nobody, a failed assistant, a homeless woman. Isn't it true that you forged that resume, that you fabricated this entire Cinderella story to steal a fortune you didn't earn?" "I didn't earn the fortune," I said, my voice clear and steady, projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. "My grandfather earned it, and he left it to me because he knew what Victoria was." "Objection," the lawyer shouted. "Speculation." "Sustained," the judge said, peering at me over his glasses. "Stick to the facts." "Ms. Vance." "The fact," I continued, "is that Victoria Harrington claims she loved my grandfather. She claims his death was natural heart failure. She claims the letter I released was a forgery." I reached into the leather satchel at my feet. The bailiffs tensed, but I moved slowly. "Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit Z into evidence. This was not found in the Celestia file. This was found in the safe deposit box of Arthur Sterling, which was released to me upon his recovery last week." I pulled out a small, leather-bound book. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. "This is the personal diary of Elias Harrington," I announced. "Handwritten, dated from 1998 to the day he died." Victoria gasped. It was a loud, ugly sound. She half rose from her chair, her face draining of all color. "That was burned. I burned it." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, the sound cracking like a gunshot. "Order, order in the court. Ms. Harrington, sit down." Victoria sank back. Realizing her mistake, she had just admitted to destroying evidence. Evelyn stood up, taking the diary from me and handing it to the judge. "Your Honor, if you will turn to the entry dated November 14th, 1999, the judge put on his reading glasses. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "November 14th, the judge read aloud, his voice grave. "Victoria brought me the tea again. It tastes bitter. She says it is for my heart, but my limbs feel heavy. I saw her grinding the blue pills in the kitchen. She thinks I'm asleep. She is killing me slowly, day by day, to get the signature. I am afraid to close my eyes." The judge looked up. He looked at Victoria. The disgust on his face was not judicial. It was human. "It is a lie," Victoria screamed. Abandoning her limp, she stood up, slamming her hands on the table. "He was senile. He was crazy. He didn't know what he was writing." The toxicology report from the exhumation of Elias Harrington's body, which we performed 3 days ago, Confirms high levels of arsenic and digitalis, Evelyn said calmly, dropping another file on the judge's bench. The exact compounds mentioned in this diary. Victoria looked around the room, her eyes wild. She looked at her lawyer, who was staring at his shoes. She looked at the jury, who were looking at her like she was a monster. Then, she looked at the front row of the gallery. Sitting there was Camilla, her daughter, my cousin, the girl who had been raised in silk while I starved. Camilla had been silent throughout the trial, sitting behind her mother like a loyal soldier. "Camilla," Victoria pleaded, tell them how much I loved him. Tell them I took care of him." Camilla stood up. She was shaking. She looked at me, then at her mother. "Your Honor," Camilla said, her voice small but piercing, "I would like to speak." "This is highly irregular," the judge said. "Please," Camilla said. "I can't keep it inside anymore." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Camilla took a deep breath. "I was 12 years old," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I walked into the kitchen. I saw Mom putting the powder in Grandfather's soup. I asked her what it was. She told me it was medicine for problems that won't go away. She told me if I ever told anyone, I would be a problem too." Victoria let out a shriek that sounded less like a human and more like a wounded animal. "You ungrateful little brat, I gave you everything. I built this world for you." "You built it on bones, Mom," Camilla sobbed. "And I don't want it anymore." Victoria lunged. She actually lunged across the divide. Her hands clawed, reaching for her own daughter. "Restrain her," the judge roared. 3 bailiffs tackled Victoria before she could reach the gallery. They pinned her to the floor. Her hair, usually perfect, was wild and matted. Her face was pressed against the carpet. "I am Victoria Harrington," she screamed into the floor. "I own this city. You can't touch me. I will buy you all. I will buy your families." I stood up and looked down at her. "You can't buy anything, Victoria," I said, my voice cutting through her screams. "You are bankrupt. Your assets are frozen. Your legacy is dust." The sentencing came an hour later, after the jury returned a verdict in record time, guilty on all counts: murder, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. The judge looked down at Victoria, who was now handcuffed and shackled to her chair. She was no longer screaming. She was staring at nothing, a hollow shell. "Victoria Harrington," the judge said, "for the cold-blooded murder of your father, and for the decades of systemic corruption you have inflicted upon this city, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Furthermore, the court orders the immediate seizure of all personal assets to pay restitution to the victims, starting with the trust of Alara Vance." The gavel banged. It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut, forever. 2 days later, I walked into the lobby of the Harrington Tower. It was 9 in the morning. The security guards, the ones who hadn't been arrested, stiffened as I approached, but they didn't stop me. They opened the doors. I walked to the elevator. I didn't press the button for the 42nd floor. I pressed the button for the boardroom on the 50th. When the doors opened, the room was full. The remaining board members, 12 old men who had enabled Victoria for years, were sitting around the long mahogany table. They looked terrified. They had seen the news. They knew the stock was plummeting. They knew the company was on the brink of collapse. They stood up when I entered. "Ms. Vance," the interim chairman stammered, "we are so glad you are here. We have prepared a transition package. We think that with your name, we can stabilize the stock." I walked to the head of the table, Victoria's chair. It was high-backed leather, imposing. I didn't sit in it. I pushed it over. It crashed to the floor with a heavy thud. The board members flinched. "There will be no transition package," I said, "and there will be no Harrington Group." I threw a file on the table. "As the majority shareholder, holding 51% of the voting stock via the Celestia Trust, I am exercising my right to restructure the company immediately." "Restructure?" one of the men asked. "But the market?" "The market hates liars," I said, "and this room is full of them." I pointed to the door. "You are all fired," I said. "Every single one of you. Your severance packages have been denied due to gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. Security will escort you out. If you take so much as a stapler, I will have you arrested for theft." "You can't do this," the chairman shouted, his face turning red. "We know where the bodies are buried." "I know," I smiled. "I have the map, and I'm digging them up." I watched them leave. 12 powerful men, reduced to shuffling out of the room with their heads down. When the room was empty, the side door opened. Arthur Sterling walked in. He was using a cane now, and he moved slowly, but he was alive. Beside him was Liam, looking sharp in a new suit, holding a camera, and behind them were 20 people. I recognized them. They were the people listed in the fired section of Victoria's database: the accountant who asked too many questions, the engineer who reported the toxic leak, the secretary who refused to lie. "Come in," I said, my voice softening. "Please, sit down." They looked at the empty chairs hesitantly. "This is your company now." I told them, "We have a lot of work to do. We have to clean up the chemical spill in West Virginia. We have to pay back the pension funds Victoria stole. It is going to take years. We might not make a profit for a decade, but we are going to sleep at night." I turned to Arthur. "Effective immediately. The Harrington Group ceases to exist," I announced. "The new entity will be registered as Vance and Sterling Enterprises." Arthur looked at me, his eyes misty. "Alara, you don't have to." "I don't have to," I agreed. "I want to." "You saved my life, Arthur. Now help me save this company." I walked out of the building at noon. The plaza outside was packed. There were hundreds of reporters, cameras, and microphones jostling for position. The NYPD had set up barricades. When they saw me, the shouting started. "Alara, Alara, how does it feel to be a billionaire? What are you going to do with the money? Is it true you fired the whole board?" I stopped at the top of the stairs. The wind was blowing. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't cold. I was wearing the white coat. I felt solid. Liam stepped up beside me, not as a journalist, but as my partner. He nodded to me. "Go ahead." I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out a check. I didn't pull out a speech. I pulled out the resume. It was framed now, in simple glass. But you could still see the mud stains, the wrinkles, the tear in the corner where I had dropped it in the snow. I held it up high, letting the sun catch the glass. The cameras clicked furiously, a wall of shutter sounds that sounded like applause. I waited for silence. It came quickly. 2 months ago, I said, my voice ringing out across the plaza. I was told that this piece of paper was worthless. I was told that I was worthless because I didn't have the right name, or the right clothes, or the right address. I looked directly into the bank of cameras, knowing that somewhere in a prison cell, Victoria might be watching. "They tried to erase me," I said, "but they forgot that ink is permanent if you write with enough conviction." I lowered the frame, holding it close to my heart. To everyone out there who feels invisible today, to everyone sleeping in a car, or working 3 jobs, or being told no by people in high towers, I said, don't let them define your value. Don't let them tell you who you are. I smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I had worn in years. Don't ever let anyone price you by a piece of paper, I said, unless you are the one holding the pen to write the new chapter. I turned and walked back toward the glass doors of Vance and Sterling Enterprises. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The resume was on the wall, the money was in the bank, and the future. The future was finally mine. The winter in New York is famous for being unforgiving, a season that strips the city down to its gray steel skeleton. But people often forget about the spring. It arrives not with a shout, but with a sudden, impossible softness. The ice on the Hudson cracks and vanishes. The trees in Central Park, which looked like dead claws just weeks ago, suddenly explode into clouds of pink and white blossoms. It had been 6 months since the trial. 6 months since the gavel fell and the cell door slammed shut on Victoria Harrington. I stood by the window of my new office on the 35th floor. It was not the penthouse at the top of the Harrington Tower. I had sold that building. I wanted nothing to do with a fortress built to look down on the world. Our new headquarters was in Chelsea, in a renovated brick industrial building with wide windows that opened to let in the air. The sign on the frosted glass door behind me read, "The Celestia Future Fund." We were not a hedge fund. We were not a media conglomerate. We were a shield. My schedule for the morning was full, but it wasn't filled with board meetings about stock buybacks. At 10 o'clock, I was meeting with a team of lawyers to finalize the defense strategy for a group of garment workers in Queens who had been fired for trying to unionize. At 11, I was reviewing the blueprints for a new transitional housing complex in the Bronx. Arthur Sterling knocked on the doorframe. He was using a cane now, a sleek ebony stick with a silver handle, but he moved with a vigor I hadn't seen in him before. The shadows were gone from his eyes. "The accounting team needs your signature on the endowment transfer," Arthur said, walking in and placing a file on my desk. "And Mrs. Higgins called. She said the plumbing in the new shelter is fixed." I smiled, taking the pen. "Thank you. Arthur, how is the leg today?" "Better than the alternative," he quipped. Sitting in the armchair opposite me, I looked at him, really looked at him. He was the grandfather I never got to have. He had refused to retire, even after the settlement. He insisted on being here, advising me, reminding me of the history so I wouldn't repeat it. In the corner of the modern, sun-drenched office sat a heavy, black iron safe. It was the same safe from his dusty office on Wall Street. We had moved it here, scratches and all. It was a reminder. It held the original Celestia files, not as legal leverage anymore, but as history. "Do you think Elias would be happy?" I asked, signing the document. Arthur looked at the safe, then at the bustling, open-plan office outside my door, where dozens of young, passionate people were working to change lives. "Elias spent his life building a tower," Arthur said softly, "but he died wishing he had built a bridge. I think he is finally resting in peace." "Elara." I capped the pen. "I have to go. I have a site visit." "Take the car," Arthur said. "It looks like rain." "I'm driving myself today," I said. "I need to go back there." Arthur didn't ask where. He knew. I drove the sedan, a sensible, reliable hybrid. Not a limousine down Route 9. The landscape changed from the manicured suburbs to the gritty, industrial fringe of the city. The road was familiar, etched into my memory by adrenaline and despair. I pulled into the parking lot of the Last Stop Motel. 6 months ago. This place had been a graveyard of dreams. The asphalt had been cracked, covered in slush and trash. The neon sign had flickered with a buzzing, dying light. It was where I had slept in a freezing car, hungry and hopeless. Now, the sign was gone. In its place was a clean wooden archway that read, "Vance Haven Temporary Housing and Career Center." I parked in the exact spot where the police cruiser had cornered me, where my resume had fallen into the mud. I stepped out. The asphalt had been repaved. There were flower beds lining the walkway, bursting with tulips. The peeling paint of the motel rooms had been scraped away and replaced with a warm, inviting cream color. The windows were new, double paned to keep out the cold. This wasn't a motel anymore. It was a sanctuary. We had bought the property 3 months ago. We gutted the rooms, installing kitchenettes and proper heating. We turned the front office into a job counseling center where residents could print resumes, borrow suits for interviews, and get legal advice all for free. I walked toward the main office. A man was sweeping the front porch. He stopped when he saw me. It was the manager, the same man who had banged on my car window, the same man who had threatened to call the tow truck if I didn't move fast enough. He looked older, tired. When he recognized me, he went pale. He gripped the broom handle as if it were a weapon, then relaxed it, realizing who I was. "Ms. Vance," he stammered, "I wasn't expecting you today. The contractors said they were coming tomorrow." "I wanted to see the progress myself," I said. Stopping in front of him, he looked down at his feet. "Look, about before that night, I was just doing my job. The owner was strict about loiterers. I didn't know." "I know," I said. Fear makes us cruel sometimes. He looked up, surprised by my tone. He expected me to fire him. When I bought the place, he had assumed he would be the first to go. A petty revenge for a petty cruelty. Are the new intake forms ready? I asked. Yes, ma'am, he said, swallowing hard. We have 12 families moving in this week. I made sure the heaters in Block B are working perfectly. I checked them myself 3 times. Good, I said. I looked at him. I could have fired him. I could have crushed him like a bug, just to prove I could. But that was Victoria's way. That was the old world. You have a job here as long as you want it, Mr. Henderson, I said. But I have one condition. Anything, he said quickly. When people come here, I said, looking at the parking lot where I had once shivered, they are going to be at the lowest point of their lives. They are going to be scared. They are going to be angry. I want you to treat them like guests. I want you to remember that the difference between them and you is just one bad day. Can you do that? Mr. Henderson looked at me. His eyes watered slightly. He nodded. Yes, ma'am, he whispered. I can do that. Then get back to work, I said gently. We have people coming home. That evening, the sun set over the Hudson River, painting the water in shades of violet and gold. The air was cool, but it was the fresh, promising cool of spring, not the biting frost of winter. Liam and I walked along the promenade. He wasn't wearing his leather jacket anymore. He wore a simple button-down shirt, his sleeves rolled up, revealing the faint white lines of the scars on his arms. We didn't talk about the case. We didn't talk about Victoria, who was currently serving the first year of her life sentence in a maximum security facility upstate. We talked about small things, coffee, the Yankees, the weird sculpture someone had put up in the park. Our relationship had changed. In the fire of the war, we had been allies, bound by adrenaline and a common enemy. Now, in the quiet of the peace, we were something else, something deeper. We were the only 2 people in the world who knew the weight of the secret we had carried. We stopped by the railing, looking out at the Statue of Liberty in the distance. You checked your phone 3 times in the last 10 minutes, Liam said, not looking at me. I sighed, leaning against the railing. I can't help it. You're checking the balance, he stated. It wasn't a question. I wake up some mornings, I admitted, looking at the water. And I'm terrified that it was all a dream. I'm afraid I'm going to wake up in the backseat of the Honda, freezing, with $5 in my pocket, so I check the app, just to see the numbers, just to make sure the zeros are still there. Liam reached out and covered my hand with his. His palm was warm, rough, and real. It is not a dream, Ilara, he said. The money is real. The buildings are real. The women you helped today, they are real. He turned me to face him. And you are real, he said intensely. You aren't the girl in the car anymore. You aren't the victim. You are the woman who brought down an empire with a piece of paper and a pair of running shoes. I looked into his eyes that had seen the worst of humanity and still found a reason to fight. I don't miss the money, I whispered. I mean, the money is nice. It buys safety. But do you know what I love the most? What? I love that I don't have to look down anymore, I said. I used to walk with my head down, hoping no one would see me. Now, I look everyone in the eye. Liam smiled. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. It wasn't a grand, cinematic kiss. It was a promise, a seal of partnership. Come on, he said. Arthur is ordering pizza. If we are late, he will eat all the pepperoni. The final stop of the day was the place where it all began. Or rather, where it all ended. My grandfather's office. I had kept it mostly the same. The heavy mahogany desk, the leather chair. But I had opened the curtains. I let the light in. I walked over to the wall behind the desk. There were no expensive paintings there, no awards, no photos of politicians shaking hands with billionaires. There was only a single, small frame. Inside was the resume. The ink was faded. The water stains were brown and ugly. The edges were tattered. It was by all objective standards, a piece of trash. But to me, it was the most beautiful thing in the room. I reached out and touched the glass. I traced the line where my name was printed. Elara Celestia Vance. I thought about the night in the parking lot. I thought about the moment I almost threw it away. I thought about the millions of people who were one paycheck away from disaster, who felt like their value was determined by a reject pile on a hiring manager's desk. I had changed the system. I hadn't just beaten Victoria. I had replaced her cruelty with opportunity. The $450 million wasn't sitting in a vault anymore. It was flowing through the veins of the city, building homes, fighting lawsuits, feeding the hungry. The silence of the room was comfortable. It was the silence of a job well done. Then, the phone on the desk rang. It wasn't the media line. It wasn't the board line. It was the private line, the one listed on the website of the Celestia Future Fund for Emergency Cases. I looked at it. It was late. I was tired. I could let it go to voicemail. I could let one of the junior associates handle it in the morning. But then I remembered Arthur's words. Destiny has a tight schedule. I walked around the desk. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the receiver. "This is Elara Vance," I said, my voice strong and ready. "How can I help you?" On the other end, a voice shaking, scared, sounding exactly like I sounded 6 months ago, began to speak. I sat down, pulled a legal pad toward me, and uncapped my pen. "Slow down," I said gently. "I am listening, and I promise you, you are not alone." Outside, the lights of New York City glittered like diamonds, indifferent and beautiful. But inside this room, the light was warm, and the work of justice was just beginning. As the screen fades to black, the white text of Elias Harrington's final diary entry appears. "Power is not the number in your bank account. Power is the ability to change the fate of another when they need it most." Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city, a quiet town, or maybe during your commute? Please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with our community. If you enjoyed Elara's journey, please subscribe to Daisy Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need a reminder that their value is never defined by a piece